Behold, a stone relief of some misbehaving woman getting the shit kicked out of her with a whip. Fucking yikes. This is chapter 6 of the Shite Guide to Provo. And it's fair to say that up until now, it's been a bit of a cockfest. Yeah, because, well, back then, it really was a cockfest. Before the 60s, the Netherlands was a strict patriarchy, like everywhere else, where men ran the world and women were expected to stay in the kitchen and shut the fuck up.
I'm serious, honey, your coffee's undrinkable.
It's pretty harsh.
Well, so's your coffee. You know, the girls down at the office make better coffee on their hot plates.
So I think it's high time that we checked out some legendary ladies from the era who grabbed society by the balls and squeezed till it squealed.
There goes the neighborhood, here come the Provos. Working for the man is a no-no. Staying on the low-low, playing with the popo. When you're with the crew, you're never gonna roll solo. There goes the neighborhood, here come the Provos. Trying to give the world back its mojo. The people with no hope need to go loco. Here come the Provos to fuck up the whole show.
We've already learned a little bit about the Provo's guerrilla art weapon, the happening, where an irrational action is performed in public to draw a reaction from external actors. As in, the Provos perform some weird, harmless street theatre, but it's only when the police break their face in with a baton that the actual art is created. Let's take an example. The Provo member, Koosje Koster, who was a full-time Provo. So this building here, alright dude, stop looking at me. This building here was one of the Provo's old haunts where they would gather and plot their schemes. And as the photo I'll show you now shows, this is where they hosted Koosje's prison release party. The Provos weren't the only kids in town committing irrational acts, because their bizarre antics were in fact designed to force the apparently rational authorities to show how at their core they themselves were just as irrational as a bombed out bong-hitting bongo banging boy bopping around a statue on a Saturday night. One fine day in 1966, Koosje the Provo was out on the spow doing some Provo shit. On this occasion, she was handing out raisins to passers-by in a kind of modern homage to a biblical passage. I guess raisins were a big deal back in those days, back in the Bible times, which wouldn't have been the weirdest shit going on back then, to be fair. But she was handing out the raisins as a protest against the miserly and stingy ways of her compatriots. So I can really empathise with her on this one. However, the cops were incapable of understanding what was happening. It was a happening. It was a happening. The police reacted to these free raisins by slapping their batons off any Provo troublemakers and arresting Koosje.
Okay, every country has police, of course. Laws have to be executed. But this has nothing to do with execution of law. When one of the Provo girls walks in the street and gives dried raisins to just passengers who pass by, she is condemned because the authorities say you're making an act in the street that is forbidden. Acts have to be done on the stage.
It wasn't her first arrest by any means, but this one was different, as when they got back to the cop shop, she was stripped of her clothes and was interrogated by the male police while only wearing a blanket. This was viewed by the Provos as an increase in police repression, and so the Provo publicity machine went into action. The follow Saturday night's happening at the Spou inevitably devolved into riots when demonstrations were broken up by police, and another chapter in the saga was complete. And yet another dozen heads got cracked with batons, and again the state was provoked. One of the more prominent members of Provo was Irene van de Weetering, who became a legend for her pioneering actions in the cause of women's emancipation. Originally from The Hague, she moved to Amsterdam when she was 17, and at 18 years of age, she began a relationship with the chess grandmaster Jan Hein Donner, and she fell pregnant. She personally didn't want to get married, but her religious baby daddy did and insisted on them getting the church wrapped up in the mix. And so Irene became just another young mother who was pressured to marry against her wishes, and this experience left a lasting resentment against the outdated aspects of society and would inform her revolutionary politics. In 1966, she joined Provo, and she brought to the table her ideas about sex education, birth control, and the emancipation of women. Within weeks, she was on the Provo election ticket, and she served 1 year as a representative for the movement on the city council. Across the way in the city hall, the old city hall. As a full-time Provo, she was even arrested on the night of the elections for her mad antics. The city fathers had no idea what was in store for them.
It was way back when, in the age of men, when a woman came and said that your reign's at an end. It was too late to wait for the age of awakening. A rebel by the name of rocking the system, not rocking the cradle. Put your own plate on the table. You're well fucking able. Not doing the catering, not doing the tailoring. I don't give a fuck what the neighbors are saying. This is my life, man. She's the creator of the Witte Wijven Plan. No time for groveling, no time for modesty. Now is the time for bodily autonomy. She dug her own ground and the way was paved. She surfed into town on the second wave. I don't care what the newspaper people say. I just want better wages and equal pay. She's a rebel to the cause. She was a rebel to the cause. She was a rebel to the cause. She was a rebel to the cause.
Irene was an early feminist who could clearly see the many ways in which the male-dominated society of the 60s was trapping women in a system in which equality could not be accomplished. So she decided to blow the hairy arse off of society's power structure in the city hall across the way with the introduction of the Witte Wijven Plan.
Irene's comprehensive plan called for sexual education in school, free contraception for young women, and free and safe abortions for whoever needed one. These plans were to sexually liberate women and were to preach the gospel of the female orgasm, a rarely discussed conspiracy at the time. To liberate women from the drudgery of life as a housewife, the White Children Plan included proposals to have free creches, so having a child would not make it impossible for women to maintain a career.
A revolutionary list of demands which would set the Netherlands down a path to eventually become world famous for the sexual revolution. While she didn't get what she wanted immediately, she got the ball rolling on the whole thing, and she kicked in the door of the patriarchy and grabbed it by its poorly maintained beard, and she set the stage for other legends to follow in her footstep and drag Dutch society kicking and screaming into a new era.
A rebel to the cause. A rebel to the core. A rebel to the cause, a rebel to the core. You better open up, cause there's a rebel at the door.
There were many women attacking the patriarchal system in this era, and there were differing opinions on how to carry out that fight. So let's meet Phil Bloom, a 21-year-old avant-garde artist, a collaborator of the Fluxus movement, and a provocateur who turned the country upside down when she appeared on an experimental youth music show called Hoopla. And became the first naked lady on the television.
A
I wanna tell you about a girl that I used to know. Although I never actually met her, but I feel like I know her intimately.
I once had a girl, or should I say she was had me. 'Cause she's a strong, independent woman. Damn right, I remember that night. I lay back on the couch and surrendered the fight. It was a hard day of being alive. Mind-numbing, working hard and trying to survive. And 90-something. Then she stepped in the screen, a naked princess in the wretched machine, being beamed into space to 1,000,000 living rooms, heralding the change of the age we were living through.
Damn that girl.
She put the color in my TV.
Damn that girl.
She put the color in my TV.
Damn that girl.
She put the color in my TV. Put the color in my TV. Her appearance caused an absolute shitstorm of biblical proportions. The TV network recorded record numbers of complaints, and the broadcast was discussed at the highest levels of Dutch government, where the condemnations came in thick and fast. And even worse, the show was followed directly afterwards by a children's programme. Oh, the horror. Such a provocative display was never to be repeated again, and Phil Bloom was pressurised to apologise. But instead of backing down, she doubled down, and the following week she appeared in the studio naked again. And to sprinkle a little extra spice on top, she was reading a newspaper story about the previous scandal.
VPRO zet schaar in naakt van Phil. Fotomodel Phil Bloom komt 9 oktober niet naakt op de televisieschermen. De VPRO-directie heeft ingegrepen.
The appearance ended with the postal address for the outraged viewers to send their complaints to, overlaid with Phil Bloom's scandalously naked body. The shockwaves spread through the conservative Dutch population, and yet another fire was set on the road to female emancipation and the coming sexual revolution. And that was what they called a happening.
Reappraising our antiquated concepts of shame, it was an avant-garde attack on the stage. From that day there's no way of remaining the same. She changed up the game and she went by the name of First Naked Lady on the television. First Naked Lady on the television. First Naked Lady on the television, on a mission, crushing inhibition on the television. I once had a girl, or should I say she was had me. 'Cause she's a strong, independent woman.
The age of Provo sowed the seeds of female emancipation and the sexual revolution that the Netherlands would eventually become famous for. And while the battle for equality happened across all levels of society, without legends like Koosje, Koster, Irene van de Weetering and Phil Bloom and their provocations that rocked the state, the movement might never have picked up enough momentum without such legendary examples to rally behind. So, before we sign off, I think we need to give an honourable mention to a movement that piggybacked off Provo's success and brought their playful, ludic tactics to the streets and the halls of power. Dolle, Mina. Dolle Mina, or Crazy Mina, were a group of feminists who sprang from the Provo movement and were just as adept at garnering publicity for their cause. They carried the torch from Irene and the crew and continued the march to equality with their wacky street shenanigans.
It's getting spicy, not about a pre-man. No time for niceties, Dolle Mina. 'Cause every time I walk down the street, it's a scene when the creeps start to scream like a greasy hyena. Some gimp pinched my arse at a party, going through the park in the dark with a grip on my car keys. What a manky safari, you can't have anarchy with a patriarchy.
serious, the shit is getting tedious. I'm tired of the clowns and the goals and comedians. The whole game's rigged by the deviants, and I think it's time for some civil disobedience. Second class citizen shamed on the daily. Unpaid labor, fuck you, pay me. Holy moly, that lady's crazy. She wants control of her body and her babies. Men rule everything around me, scream get the money. Dollar, dollar, Mina. Men rule everything around me, scream get the money. Dollar, dollar, Mina. Men rule everything around me, scream get the money. Dollar, dollar, Mina. Men rule everything around me, scream get the money. Dollar, dollar, Mina. As they felt that the previous women's liberation movements were too focused on the bourgeoisie, the Dolle Minas focused more on practical measures that included the working class. Gathering publicity for their cause, they rocked around the city, catcalling men and pinching their arses. But they kept their greatest ire for the public toilets, which were only to be used by men. They questioned why only men should be given the right to relieve themselves while women were relegated to paying to piss in cafes. They began to occupy these toilets and tied pink ribbons around them to protest these physical representations of the patriarchy. And like Irene before them, they campaigned tirelessly for abortion rights, sex education, and the reimagining of sexual norms between men and women. And it's a fight that continues to this day.